in the Ballyfermot Drimna area. I'm just going to give apologies tonight for Breed Smith TD. Unfortunately, she's nearly there, nearly back to recovery, but she's just taking a little bit more time. Quiet down the back there, lads. It's the men. Tonight's meeting is called Yes, Get Women Out of the 1930s, but Fight for Carers and Fight for Carer and Disability Rights. We got the title ready anyway. And we have 4 speakers for you tonight. So first speaker I'm going to have for you is going to be Councillor Melissa Halpin. She's also works out in the Dunleary office with Richard Boyd Barrett, TD. And I'm going to then bring in Professor Kathleen Lynch, who is a Professor of Equality Studies and also has written a brilliant book that I haven't had the opportunity to read yet, but I'm really looking forward to, Care and Capitalism. And then I'm going to bring in Kaylee McKevitt. Did I say that right? Yeah, for the Disability Rights Campaign. She's going to say a few words. Then we finish with Catherine Cox for the Family Carers Ireland. So I'm just going to ask everybody to allow everyone to say their few words tonight. I will then open up the floor for contributions. I hope everybody's going to give everyone the opportunity to say their few words in a nice, calm, friendly manner, as that we're all well known for. And I will allow everybody the opportunity to say the few words, but I am asking everybody it is a time for us to have our opinions, have our say on tonight's meeting, but also giving everybody the chance to have the floor when they are speaking, okay? So I'm going to get Lisa, do you want to get going?
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much, Hazel, and it's they're big shoes to fill when you're asked to stand in for Breed Smith, so I hope I hope you will put up with me. But I want to start by saying that the government have made a complete and utter hames of this whole referendum from beginning to end, and they may well get a bloody nose in it and at the end of this week. And I think it's it's unusual that you have a referendum where there are progressive people that I can see on both sides of the argument. In the second referendum, there are progressive people on both sides of the argument who want to see the best for people, and I believe they are fighting for what they want to see as the best for people, and they're on both sides of this argument. So I think we should start from that position. But the government's mess of it, I think, started by when they introduced the legislation before Christmas. They refused to allow a proper debate on it. They refused to there were many amendments, put amendments into this to try and improve the situation, to try and insert the rights of people with disabilities into this, and many others did as well. But this was ignored, and it was guillotined in January, and there was no pre-legislative scrutiny. Most bills have to go through a process of scrutiny before it goes into the Dáil, and none of that was given. So the whole thing has been a hames from beginning to end. And why did the government do this? Now, I think that after repeal, and after the great success of repeal, the first thing that came onto the agenda was the idea of getting gender equality into the Constitution. And, as we had been so favourably favoured by the Citizens' Assembly previously, a lot of people had a lot of hope in the Citizens' Assembly coming up with proposals around both gender equality and disability rights. And naturally these things go together because women by and large are the main providers of care in society. So both of these coming into the Citizens' Assembly made a lot of sense. And the assembly that took place voted at the end for a piece in the Constitution that would oblige the state to take reasonable measures to support care within the home and the community. It was not just about care in the home, but the government didn't go with that wording. They decided, and this is the interesting part. Like prior to this, there's been Citizens' Assembly. There has been special committees in the Dáil to try and bring forward changes to the Constitution that have been hard fought for, and there's been a lot of wranglings within it. But what came out of those two processes were what went into the wording, more or less. But in this case, they decided to very firmly leave out community and just put care in the home into the into the Constitution and put no reference at all to disability rights. There's no rights space going into this, and that is causing fury and understandable fury across everybody. And talking recently to one of the people who comes into the community reasonably, comes into the advice centre that I work in out in Dún Laoghaire with Richard, who has been waiting for his wheelchair to be fixed since last November. You know, what kind of society have we got? Whereas, as this guy puts it, his wheels are his legs. And what kind of society do we live in that does not give you a basic right to be able to do that? And that is why people are absolutely furious and rightly looking at this as an opportunity to give the government a drubbing because of this. Now, that's not the... and why do Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael do this? I think people were a lot of people were shocked last night at Leo Varadkar on the news saying that he believed everybody should, you know, he had, you know, God forbid anything should happen to his sister, but he would look after his family, and that was the role of the family in society. But people were surprised at that. But to my mind, that's Fine Gael. That's Fine Gael, and that's wealthy, elitist, privileged Fine Gael, who are refusing to give any social rights in society, who are refusing to actually give rights to people, and at the same time trying to hide behind a veneer of progressiveness around taking the women in the home piece out of the Constitution. So they got away with this around repeal and marriage equality, where they positioned themselves as progressive, while they were still the neoliberal Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil they've always been. But around this, because it actually means investing in social rights for people, I think the mask has slipped. So they have tried to cover it with removing women in the home in the Constitution, while putting in a new piece that is only about care in the home and doesn't confer any rights. And just to kind of go over exactly what is being proposed, because I think a lot of people are still quite confused, and if you look at the polls at the weekend, the numbers of people who don't know how they're voting are going up by the day. You know, it's quite, I don't think I've ever seen that before, where people are getting more confused rather than less confused, despite the very helpful booklet from the Commission. But they're proposing two changes, one around the family, which is to extend the idea of the family beyond marriage, and the second one is about care, removing the role of women in the home and recognising family care. So to deal with the first one first, at the moment it currently says in the Constitution that the family is the natural, primary and fundamental unit group of society, and what they're adding in is whether this is based on marriage or on other durable relationships. Now personally, I don't have any truck with the idea of the family being the fundamental unit group of society. I think people have lots of different fundamental unit groups in their lives, and I think for a lot of people the family has been much less than that. But if the family is going to stay in the Constitution, that it is extended to durable, to different kinds of families as well, is a marginal step forwards. I think they went some way in that way with marriage equality, and now this is actually making, now whether or not the wording durable relationships will stand up to the test of time is probably still to be worked out, because the government are very unclear on that, very unclear on what a durable relationship. One minister says, well, we don't know what it is, we'll test it out in the courts. According to Varadkar, well, it's already there in lots of law, and it makes total sense, and he knows exactly what it is. But and according to another Fine Gael councillor who I work with, sit on the council with in Dún Laoghaire, it's abundantly clear, because that person was married at 21, and that was a durable relationship. But the relationship has to explain what this is. So I think there's a lot of confusion about it. But I think it has the heteronormative kind of marriage that there were. But it is also important to not insist that people have to pledge themselves in front of the state in some kind of relationship. Whether that transpires with this, I don't know, but I think it's the beginning of a step forward. And the people who want us to vote against that are the bishops, who came out this weekend in their paper, whatever they call their homily of a Sunday, I think, that marriage is God's plan for humanity, and it's quite clear that people should be married. And then the other very dangerous group who are campaigning against this are the far right and the racists, who have openly come out, and some of the far right have hidden behind housing or behind access to services as a way of expressing what can be a racist sentiment. But on this, they're quite openly racist, where they say that this has very, very heavy consequences for immigration. They're saying that, you would be able to bring in harem, a family reunification would include bringing in your harem from wherever you come from, and really, really disgusting racist nonsense. And that is how they're campaigning, and hopefully they will expose themselves. And these are the people who want to turn back the clock to the days of the mother and baby homes, to the Magdalene laundries, to the 8th Amendment, all of the stuff that we have fought long and hard to get out of the Constitution. So on that referendum, we are calling for, when it's not the perfect scenario, we see the problems with it, but we are calling for a yes vote. The care referendum is a little more complicated, I think, for people, as I was saying earlier. It does take out the offensive, sexist women in the home clause, and just so that people know what that exactly says. In particular, the state recognises that by her life within the home, woman gives to the state a support without which the common good cannot be achieved. The state shall, therefore, endeavour to ensure that mothers shall not be obliged by economic necessity to engage in labour to the neglect of their duties in the home. That needs to come out of our Constitution. When that went in 1937, or when the Constitution was written in 1937, the Irish Women Workers Union and other women's groups campaigned against this and protested against it precisely because of that part that was in. But John Charles McQuaid was insistent with his committee of Jesuits putting that together, modelling it on the Portuguese constitution under no other than the fascist dictator Salazar, and then seemed surprised to see the protests outside. And McQuaid said, "The feminists seem stung by suggestion that the normal place for a woman is in the home." What they didn't understand, according to him, that the papal encyclical from Pius XI had said mothers will above all devote their work to the home and the things connected to it, whatever those things are, caring, I assume, and being part of that. So that, I think it is a no-brainer that this obnoxious article should come out of our Constitution. And if we could take that out of our Constitution, just like that, I think it would be straightforward to vote for taking that out. But unfortunately, we are being asked to replace it. And this is that kind of two-sided thing that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are trying to do, where they're trying to show themselves as progressive, but they're forcing us to put in something that recognises care in the home by the family. So basically substituting the family for the woman, and that they will strive to support that. And then there are many things, many things wrong with this. It only talks about the provision of care. It doesn't talk about the people who need care. And let's face it, we all need care at different times in our lives. This is not one group of people who are in need of care. All of us need care at different times in our lives. And people who need care, which is all of us, should be at the centre of deciding this, rather than only talking about the provision of care and ensuring that there is no obligation on the state to actually provide that provision and pay for that provision. So there is no right to care either in or outside the home being put into the Constitution. And this is, completely and utterly inadequate, and has absolutely driven people, many of us, mad that they are putting us in this position of having an amendment that has actually nothing to do with gender equality, because as we know, women are the carers in the home, so this is not actually got to do with gender equality. So ideally we would vote to take out the first and also reject the second part, and get on and fight for proper rights for both the providers of care and the receivers of care. But we can't do that. So some are saying so we can't do that. So in particular, we are saying that yes, we should take that out of the Constitution, and that what's going in is not going to preclude us fighting for the rights of people with disabilities, and we need to do that as a matter of urgency. And People Before Profit have been supporting campaigns on this issue for many years. We are supporting the Scrap the Green Paper campaign, which the Green Paper invites people with disabilities. There's going to be a protest next week on the 12th of March, organised by a number of different disability and carers groups, and we should be supporting that. That new Green Paper on people with disabilities includes no rights and cuts against anything progressive on that. We also need to put real rights in the Constitution. So at the moment we are drafting a new referendum, because win or lose, we're going to need a referendum that puts actual rights in the Constitution. People Before Profit has drafted that, and it is going to in the next couple of days to the office in the Dáil that actually passes through the legislation to the next point, and hopefully we will be able to introduce it soon. We need to force the government to sign the optional protocol of the UNCRPD. The United Nations Convention of the Rights of People with Disabilities was signed by Ireland in 2006. Was introduced by the UN in 2006, not signed until 2018 in Ireland, and they still haven't signed up to the optional protocol, which would make them actually accountable and actually mean they had to provide people with disabilities. But we also need rights-based legislation, straight up rights-based legislation. It's an utter disgrace that there is no right to a disability allowance. There's no actual right. Your disability allowance can be taken away from you. If you inherit money at a later point in your life, you can lose your disability allowance. You can lose the independence that gives you, that actual independent stream of money that is yours. You can lose straight up if you inherit a certain amount of money, and you can only get it back when you've spent all of that money. It is an absolute disgrace. Carers allowance, so much of care is given via carers allowance, and it is below the minimum wage. It's an absolute disgrace. They're relying on people to work for way below the minimum wage to provide the care that the state is refusing to care. These are actual rights that could be brought by legislation and then provided for in budget legislation. We need care centres, we need public care centres, we need public nursing homes, we need an end to the bloody fair deal scheme, the unfair deal scheme that is about, it's about taking money from people to fund the pockets of private owners of homes, instead of actually funding it properly and giving people access to these care homes. And fundamentally, and it's becoming very topical at the moment, and it's probably the main thing that comes in the door of our advice clinic at the moment after housing, is about children with special needs. I just finished on this. Children with additional needs in schools. The absolute inability of this state to provide for kids in schools, that they're able to get the kind of teaching they want. All of that needs to be provided for immediately. Whether we win or lose, whether it goes yes or no next week, we need to start that fight right away. We need to be absolutely campaigning for the rights of people with disabilities. And if it goes into the Constitution, it doesn't preclude that happening. If it doesn't go into the Constitution, it doesn't preclude that happening. But if we can take the women in the home clause out of the Constitution, we will have taken a step forward, I believe, for women. It's a Hobson's choice out there, but I think that we should focus on the fact that now, with disability rights and carers' rights has come on the agenda in a way that it hasn't ever been, and we need to keep it on the agenda, and we need to keep fighting to move it forward, and that's what we in People Before Profit are committed to doing. Thanks.
Thanks, Melissa, and I think think one of the key points that was highlighted with what you were saying there is that it's not just going to end on Friday, that there is going to be a continuous campaign to move this forward, and that's probably going to be the strongest point that we can take out of this whole thing. I'm going to move on now to Professor Kathleen Lynch, if you want to begin.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm not speaking about the referendum per se. I wasn't asked to, and I'm not doing so, okay? I have opinions on it, of course. I should say I'm going to speak about the relationship between care and capitalism, because I think that's an enormous issue. First of all, a lot of people don't realise we live in a totally capitalist society, and that is why we have no provision of care for anybody, for children, for people with disabilities. We don't have respite care that's adequate. We don't have the services that we need. That is, and what people don't realise is capitalism has ethics. It has an ethics built on acquisition, accumulation, profit, and exploitation. And that is the society we live in, and I believe that this is what the debate should be about if we're going to have a debate, because the ethics of capitalism are completely antithetical to the ethics of care. Completely and utterly antithetical. Because they are about exploiting existing divisions, just as I understand from the radio, that are in society, and capitalising on those in order not to provide services. So the first thing I'd say is it's a very naive person who doesn't think they need care. When you're born, you will die without care. When you get older or live long enough, you will also become highly dependent. And in between, if you're sick, you need care. The idea has been created through the capitalist ethic of us all as a single unit of labour, of whose value is only contingent on being that unit of labour, that we are autonomous. We are not autonomous. Nobody is autonomous. I am not autonomous. I know nobody is autonomous. And this idea is created. We can live in an autonomous state. The human condition, its very ontological nature, is driven by interdependency and at times, for all of us, dependency. And that is fundamentally important to remember, because no one person is completely autonomous. And I feel very strongly that that has got completely lost, because caring and doing caring, whether it's for yourself or for those close to you or those your neighbours, is not citizenship defining work. And that's a very important issue. It's not defined, it's the work that people who are equated with nature. There's a very famous distinction historically, going back to Descartes and Francis Bacon, between nature and society. The people who were defined as part of nature were indigenous people. You could read people who were black and people who were poor and women. They were equated with nature. Do work that was of no political significance, and that included care work. And I think that we forget often that what we're doing is we are feeding into that narrative still by saying that care work is somehow can be done by osmosis, and that it comes in the nature of women. Or if care work as it's paid for in this society is lowly paid or not paid. It's classed and it's raced, deeply racialised at the moment. It's disproportionately, at the moment, as you probably know, most of the care for people who are elderly, who are especially in the for-profit nursing homes, now comprise 80% of the places. They offer them for people. So they are profiteering on the needs of elderly dependent persons. Who did that? Our governments did that. In 1980, 60% of our care homes were run by the public service. Now it's 80% run by for-profit and rising. Because we haven't valued care. We have treated it just as something that comes as part of nature. That people will just do. That it doesn't take energy, doesn't take time. Even caring for yourself takes time. Never mind caring for somebody else. So I think that's that abjection of care, that disrespect for people, calling people a housewife. How could you be married to a house? Such a stupid idea. But that is indicative of the cultural milieu in which we have generated this kind of thinking. So I'm not saying that, as I said, liberalism, I hate to say it as well, Marxism did not address the care issue. Because the men who write theory, the men who write policy don't do care work. They get a production pass, as I call it, on doing that kind of work.
I like that one, yeah.
A production pass. They don't have to get up in the middle of the night to mind the babies. They are not the people assigned in the family when their mother is elderly and has dementia, who will drive down the country every weekend and look after her or somebody else. It is almost universally women. And it's not just Ireland who has that. It's naive to think that this is just Ireland. That is not the case. So I think we need to look at what we call often in the social sciences, our models, our theories are influenced by how we live. And so it is with politicians. Our paradigmatic assumptions are influenced by our domain assumptions, to put it in the grand language of sociology. When it comes to care, that's exactly what has happened. The people in power have a production pass. They don't do care work. They don't do hands-on work, wiping babies' bottoms, cleaning up when somebody has wet the bed by night, somebody who's incontinent. They don't do double incontinence. And that is the reality of the human condition. It's messy, it gets old, it gets tired, and it gets weak. And I think that when you're babies, it's the very same. So this idea that there's somehow this handful of people in society who do not care, and they make the rules. And I think that is fundamentally the problem. So I would say, now what have we done now? We have reduced care to a commodity. We have said you can buy it on the market. But caring is not a commodity, it's a relationship. Even if people are paid to care, as you know, people who do or are paid carers, they form relationships, they form attachment, and what people want is not a service, they want a relationship. So we can't just commodify everything and reduce everything to that. Otherwise, what gives meaning and purpose to life will have no value, and our relationships have no value. And I suppose what I'm talking about here is this autonomous, independent myth about the entire human condition. Of course, people want to live their independent lives when they can and when resources are available. But that isn't to say that anybody is ever completely dependent. Neediness and vulnerability are endemic to the human condition. We are sentient and emotional beings, not just political and material beings and economic beings. We are actually people who feel for one another. And as research by one of my colleagues has shown, we have a care consciousness arising from our relational ontologies, where we get to know people, our neighbours, we get to care for them. And I want to say this because it's so shocking about the constitutional amendment. We prepared in the Human Rights and Equality Commission, I did a paper which was submitted to the government in relation to carers. And in it we found, for example, this is from the data from the most recent census. 14% of people who in society, especially older people, are cared for by neighbours and non-family members. In the west of Ireland, in the west region, it's 23%. There are whole swathes of people who are not cared for by their families, but they need the neighbours, they need their friends and their relations. And to me, that is a tragedy that the community dimension was not included in the constitutional provision. And it shows the complete lack of understanding. For example, people aged between 55 and 64, 30% of them, 30%, almost 1/3 of them, provide care for non-family members. So I think that is because they want their neighbours to stay in their community. They don't want them to have to leave if they don't want to leave, so they can stay in their own homes. So I suppose what I'm saying tonight is care is being treated abjectly, and by liberals, I hate to say it, has not been a priority in Marxist theory, but care logic is different to market logic. You can't measure it in quantifiable outcomes. It's an experience, not a product, and it can't be defined as a commodity without being undermined. Care needs are variable. The needs of somebody who needs mobility support as opposed to people who need supports like myself, I've only 50% hearing, are completely different. People have needs that vary depending on who they are, and you can't say everybody is the same. But most importantly is the logics of time. The logic of capitalism is the logic of greed and profit. And one of the things that Marx spoke about at length was about not wasting time being a fundamental ethic to capitalism. But care labour is time consuming. Our own relationships, even if we don't call them labour, our love relationships, those non-commodifiable relations we do to reproduce one another, take time. You can't measure them and you can't quantify them. And what's more, they are not infinitely condensable. You can't do them in less and less time. As I said, you can't pay someone to go and visit your It's not possible to produce fast care like fast food. It's not a McDonald's product. And therefore, there will always be conflict between care and capitalism, because capitalism is greedy in terms of time, and care is infinitely demanding almost in terms of the time required. And another thing is, good care is about nurturing one another. It isn't, we did a study, it's in another book, Affective Equality, Love, Care and Injustice, published in 2009, where we talked to people with disabilities, older people, children, people who are carers. What did we learn? We learned about the mutuality of care. That you had children, adult children with some intellectual disabilities helping to care for their elderly parents. It was often a mutual relationship. It wasn't one does everything and the other does nothing. It's not that simple. And therefore also there is a voluntary dimension to good caring relationships, even when they're paid for. And that you cannot commodify. You can't commodify somebody's goodwill, the willingness to listen to people and give them time. But what we have done in this country, we have reduced time to 15-minute slots, packages, as if human beings could be diced up into little mini packages, and that would be sufficient. And that is what capitalism has done to care. And we have gone along with it without resisting it. And then we wonder why people are unhappy, why they're lonely. We have the highest rate of loneliness in Europe. Why? Because nobody thinks that it matters to give time and place and presence to other people. They don't often want a robot, which is, let me tell you, the big new initiative in Europe is to produce robots to care for you. Japan has found, which is extensive experience in this area, that, you know, the Pato, which is one of the pet robots, in case you're not familiar with it, they have found through studies with Pato, which looks like a cuddly seal, that if you give somebody a teddy bear over time, it is exactly the same impact. It costs a lot less to provide a teddy bear than it does to provide Pato, the robot. But that is the way that the care thinking is going in Europe. In other words, that our relationships don't matter, that people don't matter. But in fact, it's our relationships that make us whoever we are. And I don't care what you call that. The mutuality of intimacy, the mutuality of mutual interdependency, even though sometimes it is a pain in the neck, as we all know, who are mutually dependent on other people. So I'm just saying it contradicts our scientific rationality. It is a completely different concept. So I am just saying, let's not divide and allow ourselves to be conquered by capitalism in this debate.
Thank you very much. That was a very insightful talk onto it. As I said, Kathleen does have a book called Care and Capitalism. We don't have any tonight, but it does seem like it covers everything that you just spoke about there in detail. Really looking forward to it again to read it. Katie, do you want to say a few words now?
Yeah, well, I receive personal care on a daily basis, and I just think I always think that we as disabled people are not thought of. We're not very much. Nobody actually thinks of the impact all these quick changes have on us. Like now, not a lot of disabled people know what the green paper is. They don't know how it's going to impact them. And even if you ask certain organisations like the WA, what's the green paper, they don't even know what it is. So they can't even educate us on what's going to happen to us. And like some people have problems with cognitive understanding. They can't always understand being read out to them. So they need someone with education to say it in simple terms so that they're not tricked into going along with something that later will impact their lives. Because I just feel like this government always tries to, again, put us in a box and make us be grateful for the little bit of care we get. Like, I'm supposed to receive a 30-hour package throughout the whole week, and they can barely get PAs that do the full 2 hours. They want to come in. They want to come in, do 15 minutes, but still get paid for the 2 hours. And they tell us, and if you say, can you do this, can you do that, they always say, oh, you can ask next one, you can ask next one. So like, you can imagine the stress we go through on a daily basis to get our basic care met, and then on top of it, the green paper now is adding more stress, because what if by some medical professional saying, well, her condition won't impact when we're doing this, so we're going to get her to do this. But they don't realise, like, sometimes carers don't show up when they're supposed to, and then you tell them like, I had this prior commitment, now I'm missing it because you didn't show up for work, and they're like, well, you should be grateful that you have care. So like, don't ever, like, I experience level of like they're totally dismissive that we have lives, and they just wanna they just see it. Like, I've had really good experiences with PAs, but really bad ones. Like, I've had one PA actually tell me that I'm just a paycheck, that I'm just a way for them to make a living. And that's a horrible thing. Now I've come across really good people that will go above and beyond, but because the government just want to meet marks, they'll invite anyone that say, I'll do that, because they think it's just a simple, make it a cup of tea. Like, I have friends with disabilities that are a little bit more able than me, and they'll come in and make me dinner, because the PAs that I have just they tell you, I can't cook or anything.
Yeah.
They're just left buying takeaways and all that. It's not healthy.
Yeah.
So I think they really need to look at, before they start trying to put more pressure on the disabled community, they really need to work on the actual care that they're supposed to be providing now, and better the services they have now, instead of trying to force us to be part of this working cog and actually try and help us, try and enrich our lives in such a way that we will be able to work, because we will have the adequate support if we're able to. But at the moment they can't even provide basic care, such as people coming in the morning, like doing like basic things like helping you get up, helping you shower, they don't even make sure that our basic needs are being met, and they're trying to cook, like they're trying to undervalue us again.
Yeah.
And they haven't even made sure that the basic care that they're supposed to be providing is being provided, because there's no spot checks, there's no accountability for some people that do this work,
Yeah.
Because all they have to do is sign in their phones and they can lie on them.
Yeah. There's no accountability. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Thanks very much for. And it's not easy to speak about your experience all the time, so thank you very much for taking the time to fill us in on what it's like as well with the current care system that we have, and just highlighting exactly why we need to keep fighting for what we do need. Catherine is the Family Carers Ireland, and Catherine's going to finish us off a few words, and then we'll open it up to people on the floor. Catherine, can you say a few words?
Thanks very much. So I work with Family Carers Ireland. I've been with them for over 20 years. And we are a voluntary organisation that support family carers, so it can be fathers, mothers, grandparents caring for children, adults, older people, some people with disabilities, some maybe older and frail in old age. And we have fought and I suppose lobbied and battled for better supports and services for family carers and disabled people for many, many years. And I think actually the debate that's happening over the last few weeks with this referendum, whilst it has been difficult and tense, and there's anger and there's frustration amongst carers, amongst disabled people, amongst lots of people in society, but the debate and the discussion has been a good one in terms of moving, I hope, moving things forward, and even recognising that sometimes when we talk about family carers, we use words that can be hurtful to disabled people, and we never mean that, and that's never our intention. But even through that debate, we have learned, we need to be so respectful, while we're fighting for the family care, to respect the person who we're talking about, who is the disabled person, and so I think language is one thing that we just need to be really careful about, and it's certainly something that's come up with us. In terms of the referendum, when we got the wording, it wasn't what we wanted. It certainly didn't go far enough. However, I suppose we engaged with the carers that we represent and carers we support. We have come out looking for a yes, and I'll tell you why. First of all, around the care one in particular. So first of all, we absolutely want to see the archaic, outdated language which refers to a mother neglecting her duties in the home. We want to see that taken out of our constitution. And as I said tonight, I'm a mother, I'm a woman. I don't agree with that language. I would like to see it removed, as would I think a lot of women, but also a lot of men as well. We also wanted something put into our constitution around recognising and valuing the care that family carers provide. And we wanted something put into our constitution to put an onus and pressure on government to adequately support that care. Now, does this go far enough? No, it probably doesn't. But however, is it better than what we have? We believe it is. And one of the things I'd say is, if people vote no, on the 9th, on the 10th of March, nothing changes. And we keep talking about, and like services for family care, services for disabled people are appalling. There are children on waiting lists for 2-3 years for vital therapies, supports, OT, physio. We know that. And so, nothing will change if nothing changes, and if we don't change this wording. So for us, it's a step. It is symbolic, because for the first time ever, carers and recognition for carers will be enshrined in our constitution. So governments will come and go, but our constitution will be there. So we will use that, and we will use the fact that the government says they will strive to resource that care. We will use that to ensure that they do that. And if they ever try, for example, to cut the carers' respite grant again, we will say you cannot do that. That is going backwards, that is regressing, and you cannot. So it will prevent them cutting further services, but we believe it will give us a platform to fight for better services and better supports for family carers and disabled people. So for us, it's a small step forward, but it is about equality. It's about a compassionate, caring society. Is that where we want to live? And it is about inclusivity. It's not about excluding people from our constitution. And I know some people are talking about we're trying to take mother or woman out. We're not. We're actually trying to bring in more people. This brings in, like the breakdown of family carers in Ireland, it's actually 61% women, 39% men. So more men are caring. We want more men to be caring. We want to encourage that and support it. As I said, we have grandparents caring, we have young carers as young as 7 to 18 caring as well. So carers come in all different ages, shapes, forms, and for us, our motto is no one should have to care alone. The reality is thousands of carers care alone every single day without the supports that they need. We hope that this change in our constitution will give us a platform to fight for better supports, better services for family carers, but also for disabled people. So weren't happy with the wording, could have gone further, but we are where we are, and we either say yes or no on the 8th of March. So that's why we are saying yes.
Thanks to all the speakers for taking the time to come to the meeting tonight and give their opinions on the various topics. I'm going to open up to the floor now if anybody wants to come in with any questions or contributions. I'll give you a few minutes to make a point, and I'll take a few people before I come back to the top, depending on how many we get. Yourself?
What is the green paper for disabled people? Because I've not heard about it before today.
Did anybody have a good understanding of that? Yeah?
Claire Duffy will.
What is the green paper? Because I've not heard about it.
Yes,
Yes,
I
yes.
just see who's the best person.
The green, I'm Claire from Family Care. Sorry,
yeah.
we just completed our submission on it. But the green paper began its life in the Department of Social Protection called a straw man. And a straw man is a model that they put up there to be critiqued apparently, but they changed it to a green paper. So it's the Department of Social Protection's proposals on how they could reform disability payments, so predominantly the disability allowance. So at the minute, regardless of the level of disability that you have, you get a set payment of disability allowance. Now they're saying that they will tier your level of disability or level of incapacity on 3 levels: tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3, and the amount that you receive depends on your level of incapacity, and your level of incapacity determines the extent to which they will expect you to engage in the labour market. So if you're tier 1, the most incapacitated, they don't expect you to engage in the labour market, but tier 2 and 3 they do.
Okay.
And it's really controversial because our own position on the green paper is that you can't put forward this model when you have so many structural barriers to employment. Transport, this lady spoke brilliantly about having a PA service that will allow her to go to a job. So, you know, we're against it on the basis that it's just, it's not going to work without
It's
all of
not
those
fair on disabled people to expect them to because the whole reason I'm on disability is because they can't. And it's it's up to them to decide what level they can work, because a lot of people's disabilities, I'm chronically ill, it goes up and down every day. Like maybe I could work 1 day out of the week, but then the next 5 days, I'm stuck in bed. So, and also, the issue is sometimes some people's disabilities might go up and down over time. And also, your doctor might not get it right the first time. So, my doctor obviously saw me as disabled when I'm on disability allowance, but what if she thinks I'm tier 2 or tier something when I'm not actually on that tier? So I wanted to ask, how far along is that? Is that rejected, or is it are you working on rejecting it?
Discussion. It's still a discussion paper, isn't
It's
it?
a discussion paper.
Yeah. We could come back to it as well at the end as well if you want. And just to say it, for those there, this is a meeting has been recorded just to be streamed so that people who couldn't make it in tonight could be able to access the discussion, and those for around the country as well. So I just wanted to make that, I should have said that at the start of the meeting, I forgot to put it in. So I'm just letting everybody know now. The man down the back there just had your hand up. I don't know your name, sorry. Do you want to come in?
My name is Robbie Sinnott. I'm representing the voice of vision impairment. Two of my colleagues, Martin O'Sullivan and Ed Harper, who are representatives in the organisation, are people before profit members that just can't be here tonight because it's not hybrid, which would have been nice if it could have been. But Ed is in Clare Island and Cape Clare, County Cork, so it's tricky for him, and Martin has got he's undergoing a health situation at the moment. So, but the other thing is, I suppose, in a way, disability in some ways reflects the notion of class consciousness. It came up about accountability of PA services earlier on. Ireland ratified something called the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities in 2018. And one of the key feature of that, at the very core of that, is the idea of bringing together disabled people, so organisations that are run, directed and led by disabled people and mostly membered by disabled people. This is Article 4.3. But also these are disabled, they're called disabled persons organisations, or as we call them, disabled persons representative organisations. They are the only representative organisations according to the CRPD, the UN Committee in General Comment number 7. They cannot be service providers. That is critical, because service providers have a conflict of interest according to the UN Committee, properly so. You would not expect Tesco to claim to be representative of consumers, or of Bank of Ireland to represent bank customers. That would be crazy. The same thing applies when it comes to disabled people. But equally valid is the idea that it's not a replacement to just say, well, disabled individuals represent disabled people. The whole idea of disabled persons organisations, and we get zero funding, it's all voluntary. We work long and hard at trying to come up with a collective voice, and it has to be under the CRPD based on human rights. And human rights is different to any other approach because it's not majoritarian. It's based on prioritising those with least supports and least resources. And so it's not fair that DPROs, not just not fair, it's against international binding agreement that Ireland has ratified, that DPROs are at best aggregated and mostly totally ignored. So it's the future of disability rights in this country totally depends on the establishment and the strengthening and the flourishing of disabled persons representative organisations. So when you can't have consultations with 1,000 people, you can, they're called broad consultations, but close consultations can only be with the collective voices because otherwise they're not close. The whole idea is that if you have 1,000 people or 100 submissions, it leaves it up to the department, like the Department of Social Protection on the Green Paper, to decide which ones they like and which ones they don't. That's called consultation, it is not consultation. Okay, what happens instead is the DPROs, they have to be accountable, and DPROs are in a position under the CRPD to disability proof, i.e. to veto anything that is not in disability proof through them. And that is the power given to us. But it's like a best kept secret. It's up to the state to make everybody aware of that under Article 8 of the CRPD. They're probably one of the worst offenders in totally ignoring and marginalising DPROs. So it's really important that I say that it's just that the voice, I would urge any disabled person, and we use disabled people because it's social model language, disabled is a verb, rather than people with COVID, people with illness, people with disability intrinsic to them. So we are disabled by society, by prejudice, by all sorts of things. So we come together, and I think I would encourage anybody to find out what there are different types of DPROs. There's I clearly represent one with visual impairment, although we have members with other impairments or conditions as well. So I just think that it's central that there should be engagement, not only with people before profit, which we do have engagement through, we're lucky enough to have people before profit representatives and other parties too in our membership, but it is really important that we encourage, nourish and strengthen DPROs. It's absolutely, they're like the trade unions of disabled people.
Very good. Do you want to come in yourself there?
Yeah, although I will vote yes for the women's part of the referendum, I feel very uncomfortable voting yes for the carers because I feel it's a tacit response. I don't agree with the wording, so I don't think it should be changed. I just wouldn't feel comfortable voting yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Thanks for coming in there. Mike, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks. I guess maybe just because I don't want television, I don't want it, but most of the kind of discussions I'm thinking of and doing about these referendums has been like over the past week or so, and I've had like multiple conversations where like disabled people have like in one way or another made the or like expressed the sentiment that like disabled people are being used as props, obviously by the government because they want to like put through this referendum that makes them look progressive and puts a really shiny gloss on them with elections coming up, but also as like I think there's like very understandable reasons for disabled people to take issue with the wording of the referendum because the wording of the referendum doesn't actually mention disabled people at all, but the government just keeps banging on that like this referendum is going to be a solution for disabled people. It absolutely isn't. Personally, I don't think although I think the wording is bad, I don't think it's going to present a barrier to achieving rights for disabled people, so I would be inclined to vote yes to that amendment. But there's also this issue of like anyone who's trying to like make a feminist case for voting yes to the amendment. No, not in all cases. There's been like certain commentary where like people are kind of being kind of attacked in a sort of superficial way, just like you're not listening to the same people, when in reality I feel that there's actually a what you call like difference of variety of opinion. It's also when I think Kathleen was speaking about the mutuality of care and people being interdependent and all this kind of thing. It reminded me of a conversation I had ages ago where Bree Smith was talking about the introduction of the home health scheme when it first was introduced, and like you're saying, where in a lot of cases, essentially middle-aged people will be caring for their elderly neighbours, and this is just like a fact of the community, and that started to be supported. But then over the years, with austerity, the government completely cut that to the bone, and that's just like a total. It's everything about the government's approach to care summed up in one. Where it's just like if something exists, then maybe we'll support it or strive to support it. But then as soon as it becomes expensive or inconvenient, we're going to not.
Yeah.
I just, what Kathleen Lynch was saying earlier, I think it would really be very helpful after the referendum, irrespective of what way it goes, that the basis of what you were speaking on and the basis of your book is probably going to be the basis on which we should be fighting into the future. Because the way in which you presented it certainly was, I mean, I hadn't heard it said in that way before, even though it made absolutely total sense to me when you did talk about it. And I think at the moment we're going through with our family and looking for help and looking for care for my sister who has early onset Alzheimer's. And all of the things that I think we're noticing more and more, I mean, I would be very much in agreement with you that under capitalism, care has just become so commodified and so removed from the word care that those who provide it, as you said, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
Kaylee.
As you said, that it is actually a job and a paycheck, and it has become that. And what has made it even worse for the carers who would be much more involved and who really feel that they like to be carers is that their time slots, they are seen as time slots, and the carers no longer get paid between their jobs. So if you just go from one end of, you know, I live in Dublin 8 to the other end of Dublin 8, you don't get paid for that time in which you're travelling. And the moment you arrive in the door, you're supposed to phone and say, I'm here, and at the end of it. So it really is attacking both the people who are trying to, who will be, you know, giving the care, as well as certainly the person who needs the care and wants the care. So I think it'd be a very good basis, even from tonight, to say, let's all go out and buy your book, Kathleen. And from that, maybe use it as a basis. I think it's a very good argument in terms of what has to happen. And I do think that, and finally my last thing is, yes and yes would be from me, and it is because it provides us with the basis to do that. It's the basis for fighting differently into the future.
Yourself, yeah, do you want to come back? Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, you, and then I
Okay. So I was like thinking that with the vote, I understood, like before I came in today, I was kind of not really sure whether I'd vote yes on the second part, but I've been convinced to vote yes now because even though I don't like the wording, that's like you said, I really don't like the way it's worded. It doesn't include disabled people, like it doesn't overtly include us. I think in conjunction with the previous part, with the other part that we're changing, it could allow us to push for more rights, like within the Constitution. And if they do something that's against carers' rights or against disability rights, we could try and say that it's unconstitutional. So that even if we have rights weighing like sentiment in government, we can still try and push against that according to the Constitution. If we vote yes, even though that wording itself is not good enough. And I also think another thing, even though the Constitution only says family care, because of the other part that we're going to change to yes, hopefully that we're going to change to yes, that says durable relationships, we could push the meaning of durable relationships to include the community. Because if you are if you're always receiving care from your neighbors and stuff like that, that is a durable relationship. For example, I receive I will be receiving care from my friends when I move out where I currently am. I'm in like a Peter McVerry accommodation, which provides care for me, but is not legally required to, so it's not like completely suitable. Like for example, there's lots of people who don't receive care from children their parents or people they're married to.
Disabled people, all of that is done either by the family, they have time or resources, or it's someone is hired to do the work, to provide a service. But we actually need to move forward from this model and realize that what we are talking about of mine who is a migrant black woman. He was working with care for elderly people, and it was horrible the conditions she was working. And she had all the goodwill. She was really trying to do her best, but she was working over 70 hours a week. She had to travel from one side to the other in Dublin by bike. The payment was very low. She had like very little time to do loads of things, and she had all the pressure on top of her, because they would say, if you don't get there in time, this. So she couldn't even say no. Like sometimes, like there was a time I was with her on her holidays. She had like 2 days of holiday, and they kept calling her again and again, like, we need you to come in, we don't have anyone else, so you need to come now and do the work, otherwise this person will die. And like, they were the ones actually receiving all the payment and getting all the profit. Like, she would receive like 10% of everything that the family was paying to them. And she had all this pressure, like, if you don't go, if you don't give up yourself, someone else will not go. So it's bad for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else want to come in? Is that, or before I bring the speakers back in? Do you want to go in?
Yeah, I just want to make one point really, or two.
The famous two.
My name is Eddie Conlon, I'm the steering committee of Big for Profit. It's not a trivial thing to remove the clauses in the Constitution. It has profoundly affected women over a long period of time, and while it wasn't responsible directly for the marriage bar and so on, they give absolute cover for things like that and named women's place has been in the home. And if one reads the Bishop's statement, it's very clear that's what's upsetting them. The family is constituted by marriage has been undermined, and the primary role of women as mothers in the home has also been undermined. And that's very clear. And even the FLAC document, which a lot of people have been, has shaped a lot of people's approach to the issue, describes the clause of the Constitution in relation to women as ineffective, sexist and offensive. So it's an explicitly sexist statement in the Constitution about women. And FLAC's criticism of the new proposal is that it's an implicitly sexist statement in relation to the position of women. Now I think I prefer to get rid of an explicit sexist statement and at least have something which opens the possibility that other people can be carers too. Now that doesn't mean we're happy with this at all. We in People for Profit have, we've described our yes as a sort of unenthusiastic yes, right? But we have to, the point was well made was sort of at the top, the status quo doesn't change anything. In fact, it may fill up the far right. And you have to look who's on the other side. Michael McDougall, Aintu, the bishops, all people renowned for fighting like hell for care, public services, adequate funding for schools, for special needs, and so on, right? So they're the people who will be filled up by this. Now, I'm not saying everyone who votes no to the second one is buying into that agenda. Obviously, many people are conflicted. But what we need to do is what Catherine says, and I think People for Profit will commit to this. We want now that the issue of care is on the agenda across the various dimensions of care that you've talked about. We want now to push on with this, and I think personally there should be some sort of assembly of carers, different care organisations. They can say to each other, look, we disagreed on the referendum, but we all agree that we've got to move forward together. So I think there should be some sort of attempt to pull together a big assembly of carers and carer organisations. The point is well made by the man at the back here about who should be there and so on. People for profit in the opposition should agree to give their private members time to issues related to care in the next number of months, so we can push on the agenda there as well. And I also think before the local elections, there should be an effort to have a big mobilisation of carers to say, you made various statements, right? You gave various commitments, now we want you to deliver. Because what's distinctive about the politics of People for Profit isn't necessarily what's in the Constitution, though we do care about what's in the Constitution, we fought like hell for repeal and so on, but it's the mobilisation of ordinary people to change their lives is what's central to our politics. And I think that's the logical next step from this debate, is to get a real movement going of various carers across various dimensions of care to come together and say, you made us the promises, now you better deliver.
Yeah. I'm going to let the speakers back in. I'm going to let Melissa to finish up with us. So, Kathleen, do you want to, or do you don't have to know if there's anything that you want to talk about?
I'll just take up a few points that were made. I think it's very important that we open out the debate.
Yeah.
The human condition needs care. That's the girl at the back with black hair, and you've said it and I can't know anyone's name. But we can't live without it. It is, and public services are care services. I think that's a good line to start. Education, educare, comes from the Latin word, which is to nurture. The social welfare is a care service. That's what it should be. Health is care service. And I think most of them have been made into profit, as what you've just spoken about is a massive problem in this country. Profiteering on basic human need is what it is. And the exploitation of the workers, and you're absolutely right, it is overwhelmingly migrant workers, poorly paid, afraid to organise, afraid to mobilise, in private homes. And care is not a private family matter. Care is a public issue. Care at the level of the state is solidarity, care at the level of the community is solidarity with your neighbours and your friends, and then there is the family. But it is across all spheres of life. And that's why I feel we need to continue the debate, as you say, not drop it now. And that includes the rights of people who are also often, I feel so strongly about this, many people with disabilities are carers. They're in not mutually exclusive categories, the way we talk about it. Yeah. We would think they give fun, they give joy, they give a sense of value to other people's lives. You're not like a dependent total person who never does anything. I think that's deeply offensive, actually, including to older people whom we don't seem to think their relational lives matter at all. We think they can do with robots. That is true. That is actually what people think. Or as you said at the end there, they're paid so badly and treated so badly, they're running in the door because they have to run somewhere else and be there in no time at all. Why? Because they're mostly now hired by companies who are making money. Yeah. And how do you make money? You make money by actually paying very low wages, giving no pensions and no security to people, and then what do you have? You have unpredictable poor services. So I think there is a big call here to bring back our services into the public sphere and to have proper public services, including childcare. Yes. Can I speak? You know what it costs. You want to be a millionaire, I always say, to phone childcare now. And that is a fact. You have to be very wealthy. And there is no debate here about childcare. And most women disproportionately have to give up work because they can't afford to stay at work. I'm sorry, let's not forget the gender dimension. Women, I came from rural Ireland, women were second-class citizens. Absolutely. And duties in the home kept them in their serfdom. I'm sorry. That is where we were. And it's the truth for people with disabilities. It's insulting. People with disabilities are just like everybody else. They give and they take. You are not a liability in society. We are all part of the continuum of the human condition. One time or other we will have and will be dependent if we weren't already. And I just think that that's a recognition of that. And to have that kind of debate in Ireland would radically change how we see the whole conversation. And look at how we've capitalised everything. It's about making money. I just can't believe we've put the care of children and the care of older people, in particular, in institutions where people are looking at their share price. And that is exactly the truth.
I don't know, Kaylee, do you want to come in on anything that anyone said, or?
Just that I feel like the more we speak openly about our personal experiences, the more people will see that it's not, like, I know people do, organisations do campaigns about how great the services are, but I feel like not a lot of people actually really happens. So I feel like having these open forums actually let people hear the reality of people like me that receive these services. So I think like these open formats give people a real insight to how these services are run behind closed doors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good point. That's very important. Do you want to come back in on anything that was said, or?
Just what that gentleman said is, I think this referendum is the start of a journey rather than an end. And I think if we get a yes and we get it over the line, we can start having those conversations, but we can start mobilising and bringing, as you said, bringing caring organisations and disabled people's organisations together. Rather than, this referendum has always put one against the other, which is really unfortunate. When we all are actually wanting the same things. So I think this is the start of a journey. For us, it's the start of, as I said, that platform to push our government, whoever is in government, for better services, for better supports. And I think it is about this inclusivity, and it's including and respecting everybody. And as Kathleen said, we will all provide or require care at some points in our life. That is a reality. And we need to respect and support the people providing that care or support. Because sometimes people don't need care, but they do need support. They need personal assistant hours, they need support. So we need to widen our conversation and our language around care and support. And I do think we need to mobilise and come together. We have already said we will be pushing for certain things, like in terms of policy things, we want the means test for carers allowance abolished. That's long coming. We've been battling for 10 years. I actually think we will see that move over the next 3 years because of this conversation and this referendum. So we will use that to fight and to push for policy changes, legislation around a statutory entitlement to home care. Somebody mentioned, I think, the Fair Deal. There's an entitlement to nursing home care. There's no entitlement, nothing that entitles you to care in the home, in the community. Again, something we will push as a result of this. So it's very much a starting point on a journey, and I really hope we will work with one another in ensuring that we get those supports.
Very well said, Jill. Thanks very much.
I just feel that by saying yes, we're kind of closing the door.
No, we're opening the door. A carer said to me yesterday she felt that if this was a no, it would be another door slammed in her face. So it's opening that door rather than closing it, because we can only move forward and we can only progress, and this gives us a starting point for that progression.
Did you come in briefly and let me say yeah?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think also the fact that we know that in the current constitution, in the second part, it says that it will exclude mothers from their economic expectations for care. I think part of the reason that they've dropped that from the new proposed one is because they realize now that most people are intelligent enough to realize that to keep carers away from that economic pressure, we can't work under a capitalist system or a for-profit system. As like Kathleen was saying with her book, care and capitalism are against each other. So I think that the reason that they've not put that in the second part, which is another thing that people said could have been preserved, they realized that if they put that in the second part, people would start to think and realize that actually the way that Ireland works as a society, as an economy in this neoliberal capitalist society, it would be automatically unconstitutional to continue under a capitalist system. So I think that's why they dropped it in the second part, which is another reason why a lot of people don't like the second part, but I still agree we should still vote yes because it'll give us
a lot of applause in it. Thank you very much. Look, and thanks everybody for coming along tonight. I'm going to wrap up now and let Melissa finish up, but I'm sure if anyone wants to talk afterwards they can, they have the chance to as well, okay? Melissa,
thanks very much, and thanks to all the other speakers for coming along this evening and for the audience participation. I just want to start with the question about the green paper. I'm sorry for just throwing out words that we're used to talking about and not explaining it, but the green paper is about, as was explained, about reclassifying how disability allowance is paid. But I think it's one of the fundamental things that we should be immediately campaigning against. It is absolutely disrespectful of people with disabilities to expect them to undergo capacity tests on a regular basis. It has infuriated the community of disabled people, and they're having a protest next week on the 12th of March outside the Dáil. I think it's at 12 o'clock if anyone can find out between me finishing and saying, and we should be there and we should support it and we should keep that going. At the moment it's out for public consultation. I think the consultation shuts on the 15th of March or something, but as the man at the back was saying, that consultation is really important, and that they take on board all the disability rights organisations because that's a fundamental part of the UNCRPD, that not about us without us, that people with disabilities have to be part of the discussion. And I'm working as a councillor, I see an awful lot of misuse of the word public consultation. Our government and our councils and our state does not consult with the public. They ask for papers and then they tick boxes and say, I know you said that, but that's not what we're going to do. And it goes on like this. And it is an absolute disgrace. So fighting for your actual right to be consulted, it is such a simple thing, but we have to fight every minute of the day for it. And I know Fred's question about a yes-no being a better option, because I think that we unfortunately are not being given straightforward options in this, and that is the problem. And I think we have to take out the archaic language of sexism. And there are some questions, some of the people watching online are part of our branch WhatsApp group. They've been asking particular questions that kind of relates to that, that the second part of that constitution moves the obligation of care from the state to the family. There is no obligation on care from the state at the moment, none. It's not coming from the state, and it's not moving it onto the family. It is actually moving it from only women to the family. It is not good enough. It is really not good enough, but it gets rid of that fundamentally sexist and offensive piece of the constitution. Unfortunately, we don't get to choose between those two things. You're only, if you want to get rid of that, you're getting the other one in as well. But that means, the other question that was asked was, it doesn't support people with disabled people or people with disabilities. It doesn't, but it doesn't preclude us fighting for rights for disabled people. There's nothing in it that precludes us from doing this. There was another question about private care, and when Kaylee talks about experience as a care receiver, and somebody else was talking about care providers who are pushed around from house to house with barely a minute in between, and this is serving nobody at all except the for-profit companies that are making an absolute fortune out of it. And a fortune has been made out of privatised care, not only both within the companies but also within the home for years. Sinead was telling me earlier on today that in 2019 globally it was estimated that the care that women provided across the world amounted to 10.8 trillion. Now I've no idea how you would estimate that, but I'm sure Sinead, but that it's a phenomenal amount of money saved by the state by pushing care into families or pushing care into underpaid people on carers allowance, and then companies make a fortune out of it. Somebody said that Kathleen was saying how duties in the home kept women in serfdom. It did, but it also pushed many working class women out to work in precarious work, while also having to deal with the duties in the home. The status quo did not serve women. It didn't serve disabled people. It didn't serve carers. Why would we vote for the status quo? And voting no is voting for the status quo. So while there are all sorts of problems with this, I think we should vote yes. And I think we should. And I think the fact that the government has pitted two groups of people against each other is really the most disgraceful thing. The most disgraceful thing that they've done. But we don't get rights. We don't get rights conferred on us. We certainly don't get them conferred on us by a Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael government. We have had to fight for every single right we have. People have the right to vote because they fought. Women have the right to vote because they fought. We fought for repeal. We fought not to have the 8th Amendment put into the Constitution, and then we fought from 83 until 2018 to get it out of the Constitution. But when it came out of the Constitution, we had no right to abortion in this country until there was legislation. And then, even when there was legislation, we're still having to fight for access. You fight for your rights, and we're going to have to fight for rights for people with disabilities and carers over the next period. And the fact that it's on the agenda now, I think, leaves us in a better position. So whatever the outcome is next week, I think we should continue that fight.
Thanks very much. That finishes our meeting tonight. Thank you everybody that took the time to come along. Thank you, and thanks to our speakers.
Thanks, Hazel.